Back when I first started teaching at Parkersburg High School, which was the school I taught at for 25 years, um, I was had these two teachers that were really good friends. They took me under their wing at PHS. I had a few teachers that I was really close with um, in general, but two at PHS, and they were named Dan and Jim. Dan Daniel and his good friend Jim Dennis. They were the tech gurus of the school. They were just the most highly respected teachers in the entire school. And I was honored to be taken under their wings. And so we uh, we became really good friends, partly because of our love and commitment to teaching and to our students, but partly also because we had the same warped sense of humor. We laughed so hard all the time. Sometimes when it wasn't appropriate to laugh. And I'm thinking about doing some videos that are just a series of Jim and Dan stories because they're probably not going to be as funny to you as they are to me, but they were just some of the most fun times of my life. But I want to tell a story about the dumbest thing I ever did. Probably literally the dumbest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Um, it was the day I made a WMD in my classroom, and you may not think you may think I'm joking, but I'm not. I literally did. And so one day it was partway through the school year. I know it was in the fall. We were having one of those professional development days where in the morning you have a meeting or series of meetings, and then you have lunch, and then during the afternoon you get to work in your room. And so uh, Dan and Jim and I were sitting. I remember we were sitting in the back of the room as we tended to do because we like to sit and chat during the meetings that we really didn't care about. We felt they were beneath us. But anyway, we were sitting there chatting quietly. We weren't being rude. Um, well, I guess we were being rude, but not loudly. And so we were talking about anything and everything. And well, let me back up and say, um, one of the ways that Dan kind of took me under his wing is that he had this room that was just like the place to be. His kids loved to come and visit him. He was always playing music. The room was decorated all nicely. It was painted. He had crazy stuff on the walls. I mean, when you walked into his room, you knew who Dan was just based on what you saw. And I always kind of strove to be like that. I mean, I didn't want to make a duplicate of his room, but I wanted it to be a room that said me. So it had a lot of superhero stuff in it. But I wanted to also be kind of a destination, like a place where kids could come and relax and enjoy themselves, maybe eat lunch, and just hang around. And I feel like I was really successful at that. Too successful in some ways. But anyway, one of the ways that I did that was that I had a couple of these fountains. They were round bowl kind of thing, and they had rocks stacked up in them, and there was a pump in the middle of it, and water came out the top and trickled down the rocks, and it made this low kind of watery, trickly sound. It kind of was white noisy, but it kind of made the kids have to go to the bathroom a lot. But anyway, I had one on each side of the room, and that was great. Except there were a couple things I didn't know. Uh, well, the main thing I didn't know was you really had to use distilled water in those. You had to buy distilled water and bring them in and not use the tap water from school because if you've ever been to Parkersburg High School, you know that the water fountains emit this sludge, um, and the faucets do too. It looks like water when you first pour it, but if you let it sit for a while, um, at the bottom of the glass, there's this white stuff that settles to the bottom that I swear to all that's good, it looks like toilet paper, little flecks of toilet paper. But I've been told that that's actually calcium buildup in the pipes, and it won't hurt you. It's just gross. So anyway, we were sitting in this meeting and we were talking about nothing and everything. And I just happened to mention somehow, I don't know how it came up, but I happened to mention that my fountains in my room were getting this white stuff building up on them all over the rocks. And the pump seemed to be struggling, like the flow wasn't what it used to be. And Dan said, "Well, you got to use distilled water. You can't use the water from the tap." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that." So we kept talking, and I said, "Well, okay, well then, what do I do? Do I just have to throw this fountains away? Um, is it ruined?" And Jim said, "No, it's not ruined. That calcium buildup's easy to fix. All you do is pour a little bit of vinegar in the fountain and let it cycle through. The vinegar will just completely dissolve that calcium. You'll be fine." So I said, "Oh, okay." And then we were talking some more, and I said, "Well, remind me when we leave, when we go for lunch. Um, I want to stop at a grocery store somewhere and pick up some vinegar." And Jim said, "Well, you don't need to get vinegar. I'm in charge of the chemistry closet, and we got a vat of it. We have a whole vat of vinegar." Okay, I didn't know, still don't know why they have a vat of vinegar. I don't know what you do with vinegar in a chemistry class. I got C's in chemistry, and that was because my teacher liked me. But anyway, um, we went to lunch. We came back, and we were getting ready to go back to our room. And Jim said, "Oh, just a minute. Let me come with me, and I'll give you some vinegar." So we go in the chemistry closet. It's the room beside his room, and it looks like what you'd think, like a mad scientist room. Chemicals all over the place in these crazy brown bottles, and so he gets this little plastic cup with a screw-on lid, and he pours enough of that vinegar in there to be like 2/3 of the way full, and he puts the lid on, and he holds it up to me, and he says, "Here you go. This is enough for both of your fountains. Plenty." And so what I heard him say was, "This is enough for both of your fountains," meaning put half in one and half in the other. What? That's not what he meant, though. But I had no way of knowing that because he didn't make it clear at all. I mean, in my defense, I told you exactly what I said. So I took it to mean to split it in half, put it in the two fountains. So that's what I did. I poured half of it in one fountain. It was pretty strong, but I thought, oh well, it's gonna mix with water. And then I poured half in the other on the other side of the room. And then I went to my desk and started doing teacher stuff, grading papers, um, making lesson plans, the kind of normal stuff you do as a teacher. And then slowly but surely, over the next few minutes, I started regretting what I had done because the room just reeked of vinegar. And I don't mean it smelled, I mean it reeked. It was one of those smells that you could taste, that you felt like if you licked your hand, you could taste it on your skin. It was just permeating the entire room. It just smelled like the inside of a bottle of vinegar. I mean, it was overwhelming. And in retrospect, that's where I kind of made my second mistake. My first mistake was not clarifying with Jim. What did he mean by plenty for both fountains? In retrospect, I realized he meant plenty for both fountains for like eternity. Like just, put a little bit in each fountain and do that again later. Um, but anyway, that was that was my first mistake, I guess. But my second mistake was not doing the first thing that I thought of doing, which was dump the water out and start over again. I wish so badly that I had done that, but I didn't. I didn't want to waste the water. It really is kind of a job with those things to get it put back together. Because when you empty the water out of it, the rocks all fall out and the pump comes out. You have to really just, I mean, it's some assembly. And I really didn't want to do that because I'm a lazy, lazy man. So I decided, well, what can I do to mask the stink? Cover it up, make it smell like something better. And so I thought and thought and I thought, and then I realized, wait a minute. In my cabinet, I've got some cleaning supplies. So I get to rooting through those cleaning supplies. And way back in the back, I don't even think I brought this in. I think it was in the cabinet when I got the room, which was 1997, the year I started teaching. And I pulled it out, and it was a big jug of Clorox bleach, floral scented. So I thought, well, that smells. I opened it, and it smelled a little like bleach, but it mainly really did smell like flowers. So I thought, well, that'll be perfect. So I went over and I dumped some of the bleach into one fountain, and then I went to the other side of the room and dumped some of the bleach in that other fountain, and thought, well, I'll give it a try, see what happens. If it stinks, I guess I'll just, if it doesn't cover it up, I'll just do the hard part, which is cleaning it up, and get, starting over again. So I go back to my desk and I start working again, and just almost immediately, within less than a minute, my nose started running, and I blew my nose, and I noticed it kind of hurt. And then I realized uh, I was starting to have trouble breathing. It felt like my throat was kind of raw, maybe closing off. And um, then I started coughing. And then my nose just was like, it wasn't running, it was galloping. I mean, it was just pouring out. I could not blow it enough. And then um, after a minute or two, it kind of dawned on me, I've done something bad here. This is um, this fountain is just aerosolizing whatever has happened when I poured the bleach in, and I think maybe I've made some sort of chemical reaction, and I don't know what it is exactly. So I cover my mouth up with a tissue, and I go and I unplug the two fountains, and I open all the windows because it's just, I mean, my eyes are watering. I could barely see. Um, but I open all the windows because it's just, I mean, I can't even describe the best word I can come up with is acrid. I mean, it just clung in the air. You could almost feel it. You could almost see it. It was so terrible. And so I stagger out of the bathroom, out of the room, and run to the bathroom, and I just pour water all over my face and into my eyes, and kind of snort a little of it, and trying to blow it back out of my nose, and I rinse my mouth out, and I rinse my mouth out, and it's just like it took the skin out of the inside of my mouth. It was bad. So I finally get to the point where I'm, not convinced I'm going to have to go to the hospital or something, and I go down and I talk to Jim, and I didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had to because I needed to find out what damage I'd done. And so I said to Jim, I knocked on his door, and he was sitting there at his desk, and I said, "Let me ask you a question." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Now this is purely theoretical, just a question. Um, what if I took that vinegar and I just split it between the two fountains?" And um, he said, well, you shouldn't have done that. It's way too strong. This is 100% vinegar. It's uncut." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, the vinegar you buy in the store is like 12% vinegar, and the other 80 some is water." And I said, "Oh, see, I didn't know that. I didn't know there was such a thing as pure vinegar." Well, apparently that's what this is. It's like a corrosive. Like it'll like melt bolts or something crazy like that. So I said, "Okay, well, um, anyway, theoretically, if I did do that, and then it stunk really bad, um, and I decided I was going to do something to kind of mask this thing, and so I got this floral scented bleach that I had in my room, and I poured that in the fountains. What would happen?" And his eyes went wide like saucers, and he said, "You didn't do that, did you?" And I said, "No, but if I had, what would it mean?" And he said, "What it would mean is that you just made," and he said this chemical word that I did not know. And I said, "Okay, what's that?" And he said, "Well, it's chlorine gas." And I said, "Okay, that doesn't sound good. What's chlorine gas?" And he said, "Well, let me put it this way. They used it as a weapon of mass destruction during World War One. It killed thousands of people. And I made that in my room. And I didn't just make the chemical, I made it into a weapon by aerosolizing it with a fountain. So I was spraying chlorine gas all over my room. And long story short, which I know it's too late, I went back to my room and I just threw away the fountains. Jim told me that it was too late. The chemical reaction had happened. The fountain would never not be offensive. And so I threw away both fountains. It's like $100, literally into the trash. and I scrubbed every desk. Um, and I scrubbed the floor. I scrubbed the walls. I scrubbed the doors. I scrubbed the windows, and it didn't work. On Monday, when the kids came back, they could smell it before they even got to the room. They got around the corner that that led to the hallway that led to my room, and you could see the look on their face, like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's my room. I'm really sorry, guys." And it was fall, so it was starting to get cool, so it wasn't a big problem. But by the time that room stopped stinking, we had been sitting in that room with all of the windows open for months. It got to the point where we were sitting in my room with our coats and our gloves and our hats on and snow flying in the windows because that was preferable to living with the stink of the room being open. And so that's probably the dumbest thing I ever did. And that's the day that I, an English teacher, somehow managed to make a weapon of mass destruction in my classroom. And I hope you never do that. I wish I had. Godspeed.